executive. I'm aware that, Councillor Coombs is just joining us. Just to make everybody aware that we're now about to go live, and this will now be live streamed to the public. Okay. Do we have any apologies?
No apologies submitted, convener.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest of any item on the agenda this morning?
The supplementary item, I work for Enigma, although in a different department of its operation. Has nothing to do with the CCTV, but my employer has financial interest in this item. So in behalf of transparency, I will declare an interest and not take part in that item.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kerr. Just for clarity, that's not the supplementary, it'd be item 8, the CCTV digital.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Right,
Yeah.
just for clarity there, so that everybody knows the exact item. Thank you for that. Are there any other declarations? No. Okay, thank you. We'll move to item 3 and the minute of the executive held on the 10th of March. That's pages 4 to 8. I appreciate it's a long time ago, and life has significantly changed since that particular meeting, but are we happy to accept as a true minute? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Agreed. We then have the minute of the meeting of the emergency executive held on the 17th of September. I'm happy to accept that as a true minute. Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 4 is the Scottish Housing Regulator Annual Assurance Statement, and Mr Gillespie is going to take this item for us. Kenny?
Thank you very much, convener. And I'm sure as members have read the report, I'll just give a summary of the report and then look to answer any questions at the end. Housing services are required to submit an annual assurance statement to the Scottish Regulator. This statement and the supplementary evidence has been presented to the Regulator for approval before sending to Scottish Housing Regulator. Presented to the Executive for approval before sending to the Scottish Housing Regulator. The statement and attached evidence confirm that housing services meets all the relevant regulatory requirements set out in Chapter 3 of the Regulator Framework, all the relevant standards and outcomes in the Scottish Social Housing Charter, and all the relevant legislative duties, including those related to homelessness, equalities and human rights, and tenant resident safety. The statement sits alongside our other statutory returns to Scottish Housing Regulator and Scottish Government, ensuring we meet all the regulatory requirements. Included in these requirements is that we consult with tenants, residents on published performance information in agreed and easily accessible formats. This year we developed, in consultation with our tenants and residents, an online video which detailed their performance against the Scottish Social Housing Charter outcomes and standards. This online video was given by TPAS a Best Practice Award at the annual prize giving. Continue to meet our duties that relate to homeless people, equalities and human rights. This has been strengthened through the introduction of a rapid rehousing transitional plan and the review of the allocations policy. We also now collect equalities data during annual tenants visits, and this information will be reported on alongside other equalities data by March 2021 in line with our regulatory requirements. Tenant and resident safety remains a priority, and improvements to this during last year include the fitting of the new standard smoke alarms, which are optical smoke alarms in escape routes and rooms of most occupancy. We also fit carbon monoxide alarms in rooms where there is gas boilers or flues passing through, and heat alarms in the kitchens with a test switch. All alarms are now radio frequency linked, so i.e. if one alarm goes off, they set all the alarms off, regardless of what type or where in the room. To support the evidence presented to yourself today, Housing are now the first and only housing service that is fully accredited through our ISO accreditation. It's also supported today's evidence through our own internal audit process, which provided substantial assurance. Members are also reminded that Housing Services hold the TPAS Gold Award for tenant participation and involvement. And one last thing that we're working with Housemart, who are affiliated with the Chartered Institute of Housing. We are only one of 2 local authorities are working toward the Embedding Excellence Standard. We are delayed by 6 months. I would hope to have had it by now, but unfortunately, COVID has put paid to that a wee bit. But we're still working with the other local authority to be one of the only 2 that would hold this Embedding Excellence Award, which again would further support the information that you'll receive next year. So taking you back to section 2 of the report, Convener, the Executive is asked to approve the annual assurance statement prior to its submission to the Scottish Housing Regulator, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr Gillespie. I'll go now to Councillor Hughes, the portfolio holder.
Thank you. Thank you, Convener. What is the regulator's focus? To safeguard and promote the interests of persons who are or who may become homeless, tenants of social landlords, recipients of housing services provided by social landlords. On the 1st of April 2019, a new framework and statutory guidance came into force from the Scottish Housing Regulator. The framework set out regulatory requirements for local authorities and registered social landlords, covering assurance and notification. Performance against the Scottish Social Housing Charter, which has 16 standards and outcomes. Tenants and service users redress, whistleblowing and equality and human rights. Appendix 2 of this excellent report sets out what the assurance statement is with evidence. In Annex 1, internal audit has reviewed the completeness and accuracy of the 16 draft statements by the Housing and Community Service for each of the Scottish Social Housing Charter's standards and outcomes. After validation, internal audit provided substantial assurance. After reading the assurance statement, for example, from a tenant's perspective, what stands out? The evidence presented demonstrates the promotion of a strong tenant voice. Falkirk Council involves tenants and other service users in the scrutiny of its performance. Tenants are involved in discussions about affordability and what they get for the rent. By publishing landlord performance information, tenants are empowered to ask questions, increasing accountability. This report not only gives substantial assurance in relation to the requirements of the Scottish Housing Regulator, but through the actions and activities demonstrated, the public can also have confidence in our housing service. I would ask the committee to approve the annual assurance statement as recommended in section 2 under 2.1 of this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. I think you can't get any better than substantial assurance from the auditor. That's as good as they give by way of a validation, and there has been a lot of work and a lot of transformation, and through a difficult time as well. So to see our housing service receive that is quite heartening to hear. So I'm happy to second the recommendations, but I'll open it up now for members' questions or comments. Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. First of all, congratulations on the ISO accreditation. That's quite an achievement. The TPAS award for the tenants' involvement, another good achievement, shows that we are engaging with people. It's a quality report. Basically, most of the targets are complete or they're on target, so you can't get much better than that. I'd just like to ask a question to Mr. Gillespie. The report talks about the challenges faced over the past year, including the impact of the COVID pandemic. How have we continued to maintain a high level of that in order to meet the outcomes and standards set out by the Scottish Housing Regulator?
Okay, Kenny?
Vina, yes. It's been very challenging. However, we've certainly adapted. One of the things within the report, you'll see we were doing annual house visits, and that was very much a physical process. But right at the start of the pandemic, probably 4 weeks in, we started then using that online. So housing operatives have been phoning individuals and by chasing that up there. Now that's very much been to a welfare check as well, and making sure that we tie back into any other issues that they may have, but also tying back into the issue of isolation. What we also pick up there is other areas where additional support can be provided. All this information helps us inform what our tenants most need at the present time. Now, that's a ever-changing feast now because of the predicament we're in. But certainly that was one of the challenges we've done. And we've captured quite a lot of really good source information that supports our tenants. The other thing for committee to be aware, we were one of the first local authorities also to get our allocations process back up and running as well. And that was also adapting to different processes, using more online and being versatile. And what I mean by versatile is actually cutting through some of the red tape that we had to do before and actually being ambitious to get to that. And that just wasn't housing itself, it has to be said, Councillor. It was working with our other departments who helped us to streamline some of the processes to get to that point. So we are certainly delivering a full housing service now, just in a different way. And I'm confident that we will keep up as high a standard as we possibly can, given the restrictions that we have at present.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Munro, you wanted to come in?
Thank you, convener. Like everyone else, I feel this is a really first-class report, and as always, Kenny makes it very clear. I notice in page 28 and 29 we talk about 2 temporary accommodation and support officers, 4 new allocations officers, and a strong focus on the prevention of homelessness. And on the following page, 2 independent domestic abuse advocate posts, and clearly this is part of dealing with the real challenges that COVID has brought. And I wondered whether Kenny would like to comment on the work that has taken place in order to try and mitigate the challenges in homelessness and the domestic abuse that has occurred in recent months, and what the ongoing situation is. Thank you.
Okay, Kenny?
Vina, yes, thank you. This is all part of our rapid rehousing transition plan, and this is to obviously eradicate homeless. Now, there is many facets to homeless and how we deal with that, but one of the things that we're definitely signed up with is early intervention and the issues of why homeless or why you become homeless. And one of the areas that is particularly high within Falkirk is domestic abuse. So we, as part of the funding, when we look to tackle this, is we obviously looked at the monies that we received and allocated a dedicated officer to that to domestic abuse, which at point of source, when we're made contact, that officer becomes a peer support to the individuals and looks at ways to support all people with domestic abuse. And that also allows them to make sure that the correct support is given. In the past, when we took a homeless application, what we were really focused on was just getting them a property. We're now focused on all about the surrounding support that that individual or individuals need at the time, because they are potentially coming from crisis. Other areas that we have, and it was only 2 weeks ago that we have confirmed a full-time equivalent of peer support. Now, that peer support works in the same idea, but slightly different, where there is alcohol misuse or drug misuse, and that person is a peer support and will work with individuals who are highlighted, especially at homeless stage, to help sustain their tenancies going forward. And it's not just about the sustainment, it's also providing the support and linking into a lot of other support groups. So all in all these positions are very much preventative. It's very much to help sustain tenancies, but also sustain the well-being of the individuals or families at the time of crisis. We will only know the success of that next year when I bring the report back next year, because obviously this has just started. Unfortunately, we'll mention this a lot today, I think, due to the pandemic at present time, that has moved a lot of our timescales, unfortunately, back a wee bit to where we would want these things up and running. But certainly, we see that as a very positive move to support anybody who requires these services.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Alexander?
Yeah, can I add my congratulations to Kenny and his team on this? As you say, you can't get much better. I'm particularly keen to see how the new posts bed into existing structures, because I'm sure that other members have been the same. The issue of antisocial behaviour, for example, is one has bothered local members for many years, and the feeling has been that people have been dropped into a community, no ties, no support, and immediately have got into bad habits. It looks as if that's been targeted along with the aspects of the jobs that are coming up, and I welcome that. Yeah, I think that it's a very proactive and productive, hopefully, move by the department. So I think we should join in and together and congratulate the department for its insight into the issues, and also to the ambition that is shown within this particular report.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. Councillor Reid?
Thank you, Convener. I did have points regarding the extra staff that have been appointed. It says that the new posts will carry out personal housing plans for all new applications. I wondered if Mr Gillespie could expand a little bit on that.
Okay, Kenny?
Vina, yes. When we talk about housing plans, it's very much what we're doing is planning where they see the long-term future and trying to get stability. One of the issues that we have had from communities is very much where we've had the transient population, where they're looking for people to set down roots, be able to be part of the community. And very much that ties back to the remarks of Councillor Alexander earlier in regards to how we negate and get rid of the antisocial behaviour, how they feel part of the community. And very much where, as I said before in an earlier response, we used to just give individuals a house. We did speak to them, but it was the additional support after they were given the property that what I will say is we were not the best at, and we didn't link up with all the different agencies and groups. This actually, at the point of contact, we would formulate that plan. We will ask the searching questions, making sure that we pick up things like, say, it's not just about domestic abuse, alcohol misuse, stuff. It's about, do they need diet advice? Do they need debt support? What's the other additional support that they need? Especially at the time of crisis with all these people, that they know that they've got someone to come from. And also within the report, you will see, and I know yourself, Councillor Reid, part of the Champions Board as well. That again was another area that would help leaving care or youngsters and that in regards to their dependency when they moved into a property. They're en route to complete a video with West Lothian and other local authorities that certainly it was our Champions Board who were lead on that, to again highlight the issues, to make sure that people know that they're not alone when taking a house and they're not forgotten. So all these things pulled together would formulate part of their housing plan and make people more aware of the support that's out there for anybody.
I may say I welcome the extra staff. I think, like most councillors, we have got the feeling that the current level of staff is inadequate to deal with the high demand. There's reference also to the development of a benefits calculator. Now, I was advised by a constituent recently, and I don't know whether it's correct what he said or not, but that he could not get a particular benefit because he was in temporary accommodation. I'm not sure if that's the case or not, but I'm not sure whether you're the right person to ask, or whether it should be the Director of Finance in this case. I'm not sure. Or it's something we could leave for maybe after the meeting, or could pursue that point. And the other area I just looked for a little scrutiny was that of tenant participation. I think that's probably in need of some expansion. There's a small, very hard-working group, but so what attempts are being made to expand the numbers? It's the old story. How do we get to the people who are remote? That's the question.
Maybe, maybe our welfare benefits team might be able to answer Councillor question in regards to the benefits. So maybe I'll have to come back.
I'll come back. I'll do that outside the meeting.
Yeah.
But the question was about tenant participation. How representative is it?
So, which is really helpful, Councillor, because it actually leads into the second report on today's item about how we're actually going to engage in communities, and not just obviously communities, but certainly from a housing perspective. And we spoke about the hard to reach, and I think it's a different way we approach it. Instead of, and I'm certainly not wanting to steal my summary for the next one, but it's very much not about reaching out, but very much reaching in and open that conversation. We're very much at the present time saying, here are the rules, here's what you must do, here's what you have to do. And although we're guided because housing is regulated by a governing body, it's actually getting other people involved, but also to make them aware that the impact that they can have, because at the present time, what I'm not aware, what I'm pretty sure of, and they're not aware, is the impact that they can have. We have separate groups below the tenants and residents groups, where we have, as you're well aware, we have separate groups that work in our capital group. We have a regulation group below that, who actually monitor, and that's part of the report today, scrutinise what they do. And I think one of the things that we need to do, and what certainly this pandemic has said, is how do we reach other people and make these groups more accessible? And one of the things that we're looking at through our team is how we can promote more online and more accessible, so people don't have to either come out at night, in the morning as well. So yeah, it's a task, and the task is no different from any other local authorities in regards to how we get more people involved. I'm hoping the next report will give more insight to how we're looking to deal with communities as a whole, and I'm hoping that will kickstart more involvement within housing as well, and especially going forward with housing and the need to get our communities involved. Okay, we won't steal your thunder on the next report at the moment then. There's a reference there to that as a standard we host an annual meeting with tenants. I don't think you do a Donald Trump and have 14,000 people at a meeting. So what form does that meeting take? I certainly don't do a Donald Trump, just for the avoidance of doubt there, Councillor, I can assure you. That has been traditionally been an invite to all to come to one meeting place, regardless of where that is, if it has been up at the committee rooms or any of the buildings or an outside venue. We are thinking differently. We've done it online this year as well. So again, what we're doing now, actively seeking views from our tenants and residents now, how we would like to go forward. And within the report, you'll see that we did do an online one to verify the figures to our return to the Act, which was successful, albeit it also helps tie in with some of the other areas of work that the Council is doing through Connect Scotland, and some of the areas where there is areas that people don't have technology to work. So we're also actively trying to use that avenue to support our communities as well. Okay, thank you. And congratulations to you and your staff in this report. Very well done. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nimmo.
Yep, thanks, Convener. Can I just take this opportunity to congratulate Kenny and his team as well, especially in the ISO registration, which his teams achieved, and also the allocations policy, which is due to start shortly. It'll be interesting to see what sort of feedback we get in relation to that, but I'm sure that'll be the subject of a future report. Just a question, Convener, just in relation to the homeless situation. Has there been a significant increase, Kenny, in the homeless figures due to COVID-19? And have we had to significantly increase the number of properties that we've used as temporary accommodation? Can you maybe just feedback on that, please? Thank you, Convener.
Kenny?
Convener, yeah. Just for a matter of record, Councillor, the new allocations policy started at the start of this month. So it started first week of this month. So you're absolutely right. And we're commissioned to bring a report back next year on regards to the outcomes allocation, the new allocations policy. With regards to the homelessness, yes, there has been a rise in homelessness, but it's very difficult to see if it's been a rise because of, for a certain level of time through the COVID, everything didn't move until we got our allocations back up and running, which then meant we had to bring on more properties within housing, obviously, to accommodate that. We've brought in an additional 150 properties, and that's a mixture of our own housing, but also private sector rented. At the present time, I'm unaware of using any bed and breakfast for homelessness, which again is a really good thing to be able to say at this present time. What I will say though is properties are very, very scarce, and it's becoming very, very close to the options that we have to use. What is helping though is because the allocation is active, our allocation is active, we are starting to move through. That's also supported by our colleagues within the property section, build maintenance, who are finding ways to work around how we can get our void houses turned around as quickly as well. Bearing in mind additional pressure has been put in this area because we've added additional 150 homeless properties, which mean they have to be turned around very quickly as well. So all in all, to answer your question, there has been a rise in homelessness, absolutely. We have added another 150 properties to our normal base, but that requires additional support. What we've also done at the start in a previous report is where possible, we are actually seeing where we can sustain tenancies at the start, and we called that, we made sure that if they've been them for a certain amount of time and they met the criteria, we flipped the tenancy and made that permanent, and that allowed for sustainment of the communities as well, to try and negate the issue of transient tenancies within the communities.
Convener, I just have a quick follow-up if that's okay. Kenny, you mentioned the figure of 150 additional properties that are added to the list for temporary accommodation. It used to be the case where these properties were rotated on a regular basis. Are we still able to do that because of the increase in numbers?
Convener, yeah, very much so, because these 150 are actually new. So we rotate them every 3 years. That's our goal. I'm not saying for one or two don't miss, but certainly that's what we've been doing, is rotating them, and that will continue to be the case as much as possible that we do that, and that's certainly the goal and the target we try to do, Councillor.
Thanks, Kenny. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other member that wishes to questions or comments? Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Convener. It's just sort of to follow on from everybody else here and thank Kenny and his team, especially locally in my area, who obviously we worked with closely, and that they're doing a tremendous job. And this really is an excellent report when you do read through it. I'd just like to also thank Councillor Hughes for input and supporting the services through this. And I do believe he's put a fair bit of work in, and he's very diligent in that fact. So a wee bit thank you goes to Councillor Hughes as well.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Convener. Kenny, just a quick question. Hopefully it can be a quick answer as well. I quite understand ISO BS 9001. So that everybody gets it. I know what it is, and I know how it works. Can you just explain a wee bit the benefits that'll bring to the housing service?
Okay. Convener, thank you very much. I am actually quite happy you've asked that, because I thought somebody might ask, what does ISO stand for? It's the International Organisation for Standardisation, which really speaks for itself. And what it does is it makes sure the processes that we have, regardless of the service, whether it's east, central or west, are all the same, which there for local members and for our communities mean that they get exactly the same service regardless of where you are within the community that you live. And as I said before, we have procedures that support that behind that, and that's audited every year by ISO auditors, and then we will then have to meet that standard every year to retain that certification, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. If we are all done, can I thank Kenny and wish the service the very best for the coming year. We hope to see just as good a report back here next year, and being able to continue and build on the progress that the service has made, and with it, particularly with the new introductions around the new staff coming in, and rapid rehousing in particular. And I would just like to comment on the work that has been done by the service, particularly during the difficult lockdown period, and the work that has also been done very closely with our Health and Social Care Partnership, and actually delivering some real support during a difficult time. But thank you, Kenny, and to the team. Move on now to item 5, which is enable communities and the renewal following COVID-19. And I know this has been a long-awaited report, because it's not just about a response. It's something that we spoke about some time ago, but obviously the COVID situation has reset, which is the word of the now, our relationship, particularly with our communities. So Kenny, I think you're going to take this report as well.
Yep. Kavita, thank you. And before I start, we've also got on the call today is Jen Kerr, who's our Communities and Fairer Falkirk manager. You may know her from a previous life as the CEO of CVS. Jen's here to help today, and as normal practice, to help with all the difficult questions that I'll struggle with today in the report, and she'll answer them much better than I will. Okay. Just get that. There we go. As always, convener, I appreciate members have read the report, so I'm just going to fly through some of the poignant points on this. The report informs members about how we can build on the empowered and informed community foundations that has emerged during the pandemic, and seeks to fundamentally change the relationships this council has with our communities. In section 3, prior to COVID-19 pandemic, the council were already exploring how we could improve the way that we work with communities. In February 2020, the Community Planning Board approved the adoption of a community-led approach to community development. We call it the reach-in model rather than our current model where we reach out, and I mentioned that in the previous report. And then during the pandemic, we effectively tested the reach-in model in some mainstreaming PB, and PB participated in budgeting, which we'll come on to a wee bit later, through the Community Food Fund. At this time, the council worked in partnership with a large number of third sector organisations. So what happened at that point, the council was given money from the government, and we took the decision to take a proportion of that and give it to the third sector and allow them to see how effective they worked with that, and it was very successful. And while we identified areas for improvement, by all indications this worked well for everyone. Council, the third sector, and most importantly, the people that needed our help during lockdown. Within section 4, as describes how during the pandemic, we had a different relationship with our communities and the third sector, and why we want to retain and build on that going forward. Section 5, we feel that now it's the right time to be ambitious about this. Following the Carnegie Trust recommendations, we put forward that we should not only be looking to repair the impact of the pandemic at this point, but also ensuring that our economic, social, democratic structures and processes include communities as key partners working with these. The very fact that we have to reach out and that we find some people hard to reach demonstrates that this is not currently the case. Also illustrated is how during the pandemic the council behaved as an enabled state. The paper explains that means and how we can continue to develop that. In short, though, it means change. Change across all parts of the council, ensure that we are working differently and in a manner that helps people feel they have permission to take control over their lives, and communities are adequately resourced to do that. In section 6, what's next outlines, which includes review and adapting our approaches, processes and systems to build on improved relationships and shared accountability the pandemic achieved with our communities. We don't want to revert to previous approaches, as that just does not work. We should aim to continue to build a trusting and transparent working relationship with our communities. And I would note here that a working relationship is significantly different to just a planned one. Within section 7 of the report, some tools we could use to adapt and how we might support such changes, both within the council and with our communities. It's imperative that we take people with us on this. Section 8, increasing local decision making will require structural process and accountability redesign so we can share responsibility and control. Through local planning, we feel that it could be developed at ward level. Within the elected members would have a leadership role to enable empowerment and ensure that involvement on the entire communities they serve. We hope that this will increase participation and the range of voices in the democratic process and decision making. The Falkirk Plan provided us with an opportunity to start conversation with our community leaders on how to approach setting this up, and community choices, which is outlined in Appendix 1, give us the opportunity to kickstart the work in local action. PB can be a great empowerment tool. If we just talk about Appendix 1 now, the community choices paper, and I've referred to it previous to summary here as participatory budgeting, PB, and hopefully that becomes community choices becomes the main topic as in discussion going forward. Community Choices report was presented to the Local Governance Review Development Panel in September and sets out the parameters of community choices. Community Choices paper is split into 3 main areas, which is grant funded, place-based and mainstream. We need to build interest and participation with communities, but in new relationships, and we need to do that in a fun and more interactive way. We will build in support for less heard voices to be involved. We call it Community Choices because we want to make sure that what it says in the tin and we deliver it, and that's why within Falkirk we're going to call participatory budgeting Community Choices. Also within the report you will see there is a table which splits the monies between the wards, and we've used a child poverty split percentage. That does not mean, for clarity reasons only, that the projects have to be directed at child poverty. It's how we looked at how to split the money fairly between all the wards, and also where there is child poverty, there is potential that there is the norm that there will be areas of deprivation within that ward as well, and that's why we looked at splitting it that way. Also, for information for members, we're required to offer a minimum of 1% commit. We certainly within Falkirk goes so much higher than that. The above approach to community choices will involve capacity building for all involved, including the council officers, because it requires active understanding and commitment to addressing inequalities for all involved. So if I could draw you back to section 2 of the report, the executive is asked to recognise the vital role that communities have undertaken to support people through the COVID-19 situation. Agree the council should change its ways of working with Falkirk communities, engaging with communities in a more empowered and collaborative relationship, and offer and enable support to build community leadership. And agree the recommendations set in the Community Choices report in Appendix 1, including the framework for implementing community choices. Convener, I am happy to take any questions, but also supported by Jen Kerr. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenny, and I'll take the opportunity to welcome Jen to our first executive, and indeed as her capacity with us, Falkirk Council officer. and we're really pleased to have her, and she brings a lot of wealth, knowledge and experience with her, and this is particularly within in this area. I'm pleased that we have brought this report forward, and particularly at this time, and as we have been through a period of transformation, particularly with our communities over the last 6 months, and as a result, we do have an opportunity to change that relationship to the benefit of our communities by looking to do something differently. We need to work together with our communities as equals, work with rather than do to. And before COVID, we didn't have much by way of anchor organisations locally. Now we have potential anchor organisations in the development, but we have a huge depth of potential there for third sector organisations to work in some of the very most affected communities. And we've seen that as a result of COVID, and that's an opportunity for us to continue to build on that and actually put that into some kind of formal relationship, a partnership going forward. People who don't necessarily see the benefits of having the third sector and the anchor organisations, but they can actually assist communities by levering money that allows matched funding to actually deliver on projects going forward. And that is a great opportunity for us, and that will be guided by our communities, and that will be what's important to them. Sometimes we think we know best, but often we then have something that's very large, complex and bureaucratic. By speaking to our communities, that things can be much more simplified, and what's important to them is what we need to look at delivering. So I'm really pleased to see that we are going to push forward with this and get something into some kind of formal arrangement with our third sector going forward. The participatory budgeting, that commitment was made within our budget in February, and we have a statutory obligation around the 1%. What we have an opportunity to do is to broaden that out, so that's not just 1% of the council's allocation, but to broaden that out to bringing in our partners who at this moment don't have a statutory obligation, but there is a lot of crossover there, and there's a lot of benefits to doing that, and that's work to be done, and that's something that we want to pursue through a community planning partnership, and particularly within the Falkirk Plan, to work that forward in a more collaborative way for our communities going forward. The calling it community choices actually does, as you say what it does in the tin, and having the opportunity to offer cash to communities for projects and what they can deliver with support. And I think that's something that needs to be important, that we're not asking organisations to do this entirely on their own. We want to develop them, we want to build their skills, but right now we want to be able to give them support to be able to do that. But it will be something that will be driven very much by the communities. And as Kenny said, that there has to be a way of distributing the money. Therefore, the percentage of child poverty is used as a measure, but it's not specifically only to be used for child poverty, but for the benefits of the whole community going forward. So I'm happy to move the report. It's a great step forward, and I look forward to actually playing my role as a ward member and being an advocate within my communities, as well as leader of the council across the district for our enabled communities, and indeed our community choices, and encouraging communities to get involved. I will now open it up for anyone. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Convener. And you have covered everything pretty well there. And I hope this doesn't go to his head too much, but thanks to Kenny once again, and all his team partners and all the community groups that have done such a sterling job over the last wee while. This report is essential to empowering and building a closer relationship between our communities and the council. Our communities have proven in recent months, and going further back, that they have a valuable role in supporting people and providing a real connection. We all have examples from our own areas of groups working with council and CVS during this COVID pandemic, and I really do applaud them all for that. In 5.1 and 5.2, it highlights not only what the council did, but also what we've learned. And what I learned personally from the groups in Derry and Dunnipace was they were keen to get involved, get on, and extremely capable. My own input was very limited. In fact, when I spoke to them, I just says, you know where I am if you need me. And in more cases than not, that was not the case. I asked one of the groups locally from the Denny Baptist Church, who were heavily involved, and the Reverend Norman Graham gave me his thoughts. And he stated that at the start of lockdown, we looked at what ways we could serve our community. With the help of Falkirk Council, we were able to set up a helpline and organise a team of volunteers to deliver food to those in need or housebound. This service had a positive impact in the lives of those who used it. We are grateful to Falkirk Council for their support, so that's right from Reverend Norman Graham himself. I think that sums up the importance of the community's empowerment and working collaboratively together. The partnerships we have built on and improved with our communities and CVS will stand us in good stead moving forward, especially with PB participatory budgeting, which I'm sure will lead to exciting projects coming from the people who know their communities and areas better than anyone. Happy to second this report, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. The sort of theme for the Carnegie Trust is basically to build back better. Totally agree with that. This report has been long awaited and very welcome. I think we've seen from the east and this pandemic how communities pull together and work very closely with the council to get things done and help the most vulnerable. And I think we have a duty to empower communities further. We have seen a great deal of community leaders emerging over this period of time, and a lot of people involved in trying to be as effective as they can for the community. So we have a duty to try and engage better with the communities, and how we do that, I'll maybe just talk about in a wee minute, and Kenny can maybe strengthen that. We have seen the implications of CVS being involved. I think that's been fantastic. Their input, and we don't want to lose that relationship. And it was good to see that Kenny took advantage of the transfer window and brought Jen on board. I think one of the things we need to do is we do need to turn the triangle upside down, where council makes decisions and say, well, we're going to put a play park here or whatever, and we have no particular difficulty with communities. So I think the people, if you like, could be the phrase. So I think we do need to find out so one of the questions I'm going to ask Kenny is, once I'm finished, is basically around how do we get past the people that shout the loudest in communities? You know, how do we reach sort of more engaged people that are generally not involved? You know, their community groups set up, and we know the ones that sort of shout the loudest. And so, how do we reach out to everybody in the communities so they've got active participation? And I think one of the things we need to do is reach out to the young people, because it's their future really we're talking about here. So how do we engage all the young people and get their fresh ideas? Because they're generally buzzing with ideas, and we need to find a way to do that. I think Kenny's team under the community work stream, across the council, there's different people doing different things in the communities. And I think if everything's channeled through Kenny's team and the team that he's building around them, I think that'll see a significant improvement. And I think we will get there. And I do get the feeling we are getting there. And certainly on the community planning partnership meeting last week, I did feel that there was more collaboration than maybe I felt before. Everybody seemed engaged, and certainly whether it's the pandemic that's focused everybody's minds, I don't know, but everybody seemed more engaged and sort of interfaced than before. And it was really quite heartening to see that. So for me, I think it is the right way to go, and we are allocating 1% of the budget. But just on page 62 4.1, it does say in response to COVID-19, COSLA will meet the Cabinet Secretary for Communities and Local Government in early September to discuss a proposal for a revised approach to delivery of a participatory budgeting, or as we're calling it, community choices, and so it should be community choices. So it's proposed that the 1% target should be pushed back until fiscal year 22-23 at the earliest. So I don't know how people feel about that, but I personally think we should be doing it right now. I don't know if we've taken that decision to do it right now, but that's certainly, I wouldn't want to see it pushed back. So I think that's basically all I've got to say, and I'd like to thank Kenny again for he's heading up that team, and I know Kenny is the first person to say it's not about me, it's about the team round about him, and he's building a good team, and I look forward to input for Jen over the coming year to see where we're going with this. But I think it's an exciting time for communities, and I do look forward to seeing that empowerment and people being engaged. But another question I'd like to ask is around how does this translate into action? You know, how do people, like in my ward in Falkirk North, Baysford, Langleys, down the Bog, etc., how do they bid in for this money? I think whatever it is for my ward, 150,000 or something in the first year. How do people actually for that, and who decides what projects are awarded? So I'll just kind of leave it at that, and thanks again for bringing this report.
Okay, we'll try and work our way through all of that, and I don't know whether you want to take part, and maybe Jen wants to maybe take part of that. Kenny, you're on mute, Kenny. Right, that's it.
Sorry, right, thank you. Somebody's unmuted me, thank you. Thanks. I'll try my best to pick up all the points, and apologies, Councillor, if I've missed any, and please come back in, and I'll shout for help for the transfer earlier on and get Jen into support. Just to make members aware, it was an undisclosed fee, just in case anybody was looking to know that. And thank you very much for the warm praise for the report, and to my team, as you very much said, it is about a team. It's certainly with the communities paper, it's very much about partnership, and it's about everybody, yourselves included as members, because as I said in the report, it's about yourselves going to help take this forward. So maybe tying back a couple of things that I've written down here, Councillor. We are still aiming for the 1% minimum, and it's a minimum 1%. Well, there is no report to take away from that. We could have waited for that meeting to happen with the Cabinet Secretary. However, it was pushed back again, and a decision was made in regards to the team and myself. Can we push this forward? We have the resources, and we're pushing that forward now. And we're certainly still looking to identify projects to a minimum of the 1% and make sure that we achieve that from this year. You spoke earlier in regards to how do we stop people who shout the loudest. I think your knowledge was earlier there, and I think this entire approach is designed to encourage those that shout the loudest to get to know the other voices in their communities and represent it or include it in their views. We'll need to build that, but we've heard through COVID-19 that community leaders also saw as part of their community that they had forgotten about or not seen before. And I think that ties probably into some of what Councillor Gardner had said earlier in regards to who were the forgotten people in communities. One even said that they thought they were serving all the community, and I remember it, and they know that they weren't when they've actually had further discussions with others. This experience has encouraged them to help, keep helping post-COVID and support their neighbours, and many response groups are initially at the present time supporting new activities such as clothing exchange plans, community eating. Also, they're looking at sharing premises and increasing their network. So there's a lot of positivity that's came out before, come from COVID-19, where it was very insular to who was speaking loudest to allow our hard-to-reach groups. And I've said before about the issue about hard to reach. Hard to reach is just what I'll call, for our sake, for this meeting, is a lazy terminology that we have not tried hard enough to reach these parts of the communities, or we don't have the resources. And that's very much where we see our third sector partners coming in there, because they tie in, certainly CVS and who will pivotal to that, tie in with a lot of other groups and minority support groups, and they tie back in and get to hear the individual voices. And we see this as very innovative, very brave, and very much empowering. And that's what came from COVID, the pandemic, is where we have truly, truly empowered our communities and reached in and shown trust, shown transparency to them. And that has been rewarded tenfold by the community's commitment, and we've all seen that. It also ties back into, I think, the other question that you raised, Councillor, in regards to the younger people, and we do that through the same process. But what we're also doing is what we've not done before, is linking in with partners and other service users who work with the youngsters, like their schools and our third sector and different group or leaving care. These were all people that were there. They were tools that we could use and valuable information that we didn't use as a partnership approach. But this paper and the way that we're looking forward, we'll look at obviously tying that together and making sure that we have a much better outcome for everybody in our community, regardless if you shout the loudest, regardless of your age or your involvement in your communities. And what we're saying now is we're confident that that will capture the majority, and where it doesn't capture the majority, we will try even harder to catch the ones that we don't catch with a continual assessment going forward. I hope that's answered all the questions that you asked. If not, happy to respond, Karina.
There is the question around how the community choices is going to work. I know that there is a scheme there that's one that we're looking to emulate, so I don't know whether you want to say a bit about that.
Yeah, so there's 2 or 3 different models that we have there at the present time, and one of the things that we're looking to do, and if I give, regardless of what the model is, and if we go with the one that you mentioned earlier, you mentioned the place-based one, and if you have, for instance, £100,000 and you go to your communities as a whole, what projects do you want, and it meets the criteria, because we need to be supported, we would need to make sure that it's stacked up and there's a viable business plan for that. If you got 10 projects in and the 10 projects equal to 100,000, we would look at that, and if they're stacked up, we could go ahead with them. However, if the 10 projects all stacked up, but then to get them off the ground and to make them happen cost 150,000, what we would then do is we'd put all these projects out to your ward community for vote. Now that would be done in many ways. It will be online, it can be letter drop, we can do what we said earlier within it in a fun way where we can have difficultly now through the pandemic, but when not the pandemic or other ways we can do it online through video, is fun ways to make sure that they're aware of what's going on through stalls and different activities. So then what happens, it's the full community that we get to vote on the projects within your individual wards. That again gives everybody an equal opportunity to vote what they want to happen in their community and not have to be involved in a community group if they've not got the time to do that. They'll also, in other areas, we'll need to look at potential panels and a group of panels made up of individuals that will obviously have to look at different ways that we can look at some of our grant funding projects as well. But that's been worked on at the present time with one of the new staff within the communities team, and I'm happy to provide members with additional information or come back with additional report once that's been fully established.
Okay, I know Councillor Kerr's wanting to come in, but do we have a time scale for the implementation of the community choices?
Sorry, Convener, could you repeat that? I got an echo there, sorry.
Apologies. I just wondered if there's a time scale for the implementation of the Community Choices Fund. So I'm aware that we allocated that funding in February. We're coming towards the end of the year, and there's an obligation on us to make sure that that's used appropriately and communities are able to access it.
Not that I hope that Jen falls off her chair at the present time, because she has just been a week. But we are looking to have something before Christmas to get out to communities to make them aware, and full endorsement of that and community involvement after the year. What we'd also like to bring into play, convener, is that the council also allowed a sprint team involved to take this forward, which is 4 individuals who will be solely dedicated to take these projects and make sure that it links into other major projects that we have in the council. So again, they will be instrumental to taking this to communities within the ward level and the 3 locales.
Thank you, Kenny. I'll bring in Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, convener. I just, as previous speakers have said, I'd like to thank Kenny and his team for this report. And as Councillor Gardner mentioned earlier on, that the groups that came about because of the COVID have worked really hard. However, we can't forget the groups that were there before the pandemic, who have been helping our communities for years. We need to make sure that they're included in anything we do, and I'm sure Ken and his team will include them. Communities were in the past the most important things in their areas, and hopefully going down this road will bring back that ethos. We just need to remember the small and very small communities that each of our wards have, convener. The business, when we're talking about a business plan for a bid for these, for this money, we just need to make sure that the support is there to let these groups put forward a business plan. And as most of you know, Councillor McCluskey, Councillor Hughes and myself have got 12 small villages, and not all of them have community groups. So I would like to think that the 3 of us work collaboratively very well on lots of items and issues, and I'm just like to be assured that if allocation is getting put out, that all these communities will be included. And it's about, Kenny mentioned about going to communities and voting. Probably Madison is our biggest village in our area. Well, one of the biggest. If everybody votes in Madison, they'll get the allocation. Where if you go to places like Muirhavenside, Limerick, Stanburn, where there's a very small amount of people, we just need to make sure that these villages and these people are being heard and represented. Probably the last piece, convener, and it's a question. If we don't use the money, as you say, convener, that there's money there for this year. If we don't use the money in this financial year, will it be carried forward to that community, or will they lose it? Thanks, convener.
Thanks, Councillor Kerr. My understanding is if the full allocation of the £1 million for this year isn't spent, it will roll over to next year into the £2 million pot that's available for next year, so it won't be lost. Kenny, do you want to make comment with regard to the support for groups, and particularly around the villages where there may not be community groups? Because I don't think this is specific to just community groups. It's about communities coming together. It doesn't necessarily have to be that constituted embedded group.
Yep. Convener, absolutely correct. One of the things that we've recognised, and I think you spoke earlier, convener, in regards to anchor organisations, one of the things that we have not got a lot of, and we only had 3 in the time in Falkirk at the time, was anchor organisations. And if you're an anchor organisation, it allows you to bid for different monies, bigger support through your communities. And what we need to do is to get less of our officers leading community groups and allowing them to lead themselves. So we recognise that we need to put more support in and actually allowing our groups to mature and allowing our communities to learn additional skills. And part of these additional skills is to support them with specialist skills. When we spoke about business plans and things like that, we will have officers there that will help them pull them together, prepare them. We'll make these as easy as possible, that it makes sure that it ticks all the boxes and makes sure that it's sustainable. One of the things we don't want is projects that are a really good idea, but we've missed a fundamental flaw in regards to why we don't want to continue, because actually we want to support it and say, well, actually, for this to continue for the years to go, we need to look at that and support it there. So, yeah, this is very much our first go at this. I personally, I may be wrong, I'm not thinking we're going to have these huge big projects straight away to start with. I think there'll be a lot of what I'll call small personal projects to our communities to get it off the ground. And I think, tying back to your other point, Councillor, in regards to communities, it doesn't have to be a registered organisation. It can be any group can come together with what they want, because, again, it's a community money. And as long as we've got an idea, and it's an idea supported by one other person, we'll certainly send a team in there to help support and see how that goes through. I think we will learn a lot of lessons going forward. There is no question what we are doing is ambitious. To my knowledge, and looking at other local authorities, the way that we are doing this amount of money that we are forwarding to our communities is not getting done to this level elsewhere. So we are being ambitious, we are tackling things head on, and that's why, as I said before, without doubt, we need our partner support, and we certainly need yourselves to help us learn, but also evolve, and also get our communities to trust us, because it's been such a long time that our communities and we used to be saying this is what's happening, and not we need your help or we need your input. We're here to help you. And I think it was mentioned earlier when you were speaking, councillors, where communities came to us for help and we didn't tell them this is what to do. And I think that's the fundamental change, and that's a fundamental change about community choices. We're there to support the communities to the very end.
Thank you, Kenny. Councillor Nimmo.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. The comments I'm going to make actually follow on from the comments I made at the recent full council meeting. I do think we have to change the way we work with communities, but not just how we work, it's about how we communicate with them and the general public in general. At the last council meeting, there was a report which detailed a consultation exercise with communities, and there was over 99% of the public failed to respond. Now, like I said at the time, that's just not good enough. There needs to be work done to improve that significantly. Now, I'm going to thank Kenny and his team yet again. There seems to be a theme here, but they seem to have taken the initiative forward already when the housing rent increase consultation exercise was published. For every completed forum, there's going to be £1 donated to Strathcarron Hospice. Now, I'm not aware if the council's gone down this avenue before. I'm certainly not aware of it, but I think this is something that might be worthwhile, and it'd be interesting to find out what sort of return we get for this exercise. I think it's a great initiative, and that's the sort of thinking that we need to have when it comes to communicating with local communities and groups, and as I said, the public in general. I'd be interested to hear from Kenny what his thinking was behind this, in particular the link with Strathcarron Hospice. If you could maybe provide some further details in relation to that, because I think that's something that could be taken forward right across the council. Thanks, Convener.
It was also done as part of a staff survey, where there was a donation sent to a charity. I think it's changed as years have gone by about which charity we've given to, because that's been a number of years we've done that with the rent consultation. Kenny?
Happy to come in. No, you're absolutely right. This was something that we looked at, and we did build on, I'll call it partnership working. And at the time, adapted what was taken forward by Karen's team at the time in regards to the tenants, by our staff survey. But what we did do is we asked our tenants, as always, because it was a rent consultation, and it was them who voted on where it should go, and I think a lot close to their hearts. I think, though, going forward, it is about getting people involved, and I appreciate we're donating something to Strathcarron, and it has got us some more involvement, but we think these numbers we could do better. And it's not just about the pound in there, but there's different ways. And I think that's what the report's saying. And if you don't mind, convener, I'd like to bring Jen in here just to give a wee bit more about tackling our third sector and how we'll see and how we feel that we can be inspired to get a lot more people involved. If that's okay, convener.
Yeah, thank you, Jen.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I agree. How we communicate and what we communicate is really, really important. And I think that's something that we want to look at really closely this year. There's a difference between communicating what it is the council wants an opinion from the public on and what the public would like to do to work for themselves and for their communities. The report talks about giving people permission to look after their communities and their lives. And at the beginning of COVID, I actually had a phone call when I was at my CVS desk where someone phoned me up and asked me if it was okay to tap their neighbour's door and offer to make them dinner. And I kind of thought, what's the point of this? Like, yeah, of course you can do that. And it really struck me that people feel they need permission to help one another still sometimes. And communities took that permission through COVID and they used it. We want to continue to create that sense of empowerment. They've got it now. We want to continue that. They don't need permission. So how we communicate, likewise, even through community choices, we can communicate in ways with wording that is enabling. So, things about council services, we'd like your opinion on how to do that, and we'd love your input on that. But actually, one of the things we want to communicate is you want to do things for your own communities and for yourselves. What are those? We've never actually asked that. We're always asking opinions about public services. What actually services do communities want to do? Because we saw, and I think someone said earlier, they're capable and able and willing to help. And we've just never really given them the space to think that through and tell us, okay, we want to do this. We need your help to do that. You guys do that, we'll do this. So no, I agree. Communication is really important. And the Falkirk plan, as we develop it, is going to be the beginning of a conversation rather than a consultation. And we're quite clear on that. We're going to start that by saying to people and communities and residents, what do you want to do? What do you want us to do? How can we work alongside with you? What's your role in that? What's ours? Rather than, this is what we think. What do you think of that? It's quite a subtle change, but it's a really important one. And language is super, super important in that.
Thank you. And just on that, Jen, while our communities are seeking permission to do things, we need to be able to give permission. But as a council, we also need to be prepared to let go of things and be prepared to be led by what's important within our communities as well. Mm-hmm. I've got Councillor Munro, and then Councillor Bowson, and Councillor Alexander.
Thank you, convener. This is a very important conversation we're having because it's about council having more to do with much less money, and therefore it needs to be spent in the best interests of communities. However, participatory budgeting isn't new. What this report shows is that what we have is a new cohort of voluntary organisations coming to the fore during the COVID challenge, and many organisations have stepped up to the plate. But prior to that, we still, as somebody else already said, we had other organisations who were already involved in their communities. And in my community, we know there are over 80 organisations who are very busy in their communities. And in the earlier participatory budgeting that took place in 2018, our community produced a report which was organised by the Electoral Reform Trust and Coalfields Regeneration. And this report actually set out a whole raft of suggestions and ideas for community engagement, and also the organisations which could help deliver it. And this report, which is here, looked at improving town centres, heritage, local transport, bills, natural environment, all sorts of things. And although this was done over a number of months and was very comprehensive, and it's not the first report of its kind, and I believe other wards have done it, Grangemouth perhaps. Other than the participatory budgeting funding that was allocated following this, nothing else happened. And it really is important in going forward that the ideas that were generated don't sit in somebody's desk drawer and are taken up. And I think that's the challenge we face. You know, it's not just dishing out small amounts of money, it's providing outcomes and a kind of continuity where the community feel more and more engaged, and that what we have is officers talking to community on the ground to facilitate some of these actions actually taking place. But communities are looking for permission in some senses, but they're also looking for support. And I think it's incumbent upon us to actually sort of ensure that rather than talking about these things and believing that it's just a question of the money, it really is about walking the talk this time. We really have to go that step further and actually take on board all the ideas that communities have and give them the tools that they need to actually carry out some of these actions. And I think if more is done in that direction, then we may well be surprised by the extent to which our communities do engage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Convener. First of all, can I thank Kenny for his honesty as part of this report of where we were and where he wants to take us. I think that's an important thing to start with. During the ongoing pandemic, I had a few phone calls with Jen, which I found very interesting, and we managed to develop a number of things. What I can see for here, Kenny, is the lessons seem to be learnt, and you're looking at the lessons. I think the communities have learnt a lot over the last 6 months as well. We've been operating a community group for over a year, and even speaking to Stennismuir Football Club, who are a community interest company, they weren't sure where they could go and get money, and they were a bit reluctant to go and do it. Now they're professionals at it. They've learnt the lesson of how to go and do these things. They've now become an anchor organisation, as was spoken about earlier on. The other thing we've got, and something to keep in mind, is we've also got private business involved. And because private businesses do employ a lot of local people, sorry, I'm going to name them, but Karen Bathrooms in particular, they've got 140 people that work in there, vast majority of them, Stennismuir and Karen area. So it's a good place to go and find out and get involved with that. Plus, the other thing is that they've got this stuff called money as well. So projects, and we've got a certain amount of money for the Carskinard and Trice ward. Can that be used as a part funder, as a leverage funder? To work on, because we could have bigger there may be a project which is bigger than the sum that's there, and so this is part of the lessons we've learnt. Before, we would have looked at that sum and said we can only bid in for that amount, and then what do we do? Now people are very aware that if they can leverage in a certain amount of money, we can then go to other bodies, of which Jen was absolutely amazing at being able to find them, and I know some of the people she's been speaking to and been helping with them is helping as well. I think you're right, but I think you're a great acquisition, Jen, and I think that will help the council a lot. We looked at, we had the food pantry, we had the Stennismuir Football Club, we had 2 schools involved, and I don't think we missed that out either. I think they involved in the schools. You had Trice Community Sports Club, But then you went on to the more traditional bodies like the Salvation Army, the Rotarians, the Round Table, all get involved and all still want to be involved. If we're going to do this, we need to harness it now and not let this go. And I can only talk about my own ward. I know other great things have happened in other wards, but it's if we can get this moving and moving quickly, we'll probably be able to harness a great number of people and voices. Those people and voices then could possibly help us to get the message out to the rest of the community. If I stand in the middle of the street and I try to talk to people, there's only so many people I've talked to. We were talking about 250 volunteers that were working over the last 6 months, shopping, delivering food. Those 250 people talk to 10 people each. We're then hitting 2,500 people, and that can grow. But the key with it is, if it doesn't happen until next year, it'll be too late. It needs to happen now, and we need to be speaking now. Can you just confirm a bit on the money that it can be used for park, Kenny? Or maybe that's Jen, maybe actually more Jen's question, that it can be used as leverage money?
I'm just going to answer that question because yes, it can be used as matched funding. It's actually actively encouraged to be used as matched funding in order to lever in additional monies. I don't want to cut the item short, but I'm going to try and sort of move on. I know that Councillor Alexander wants to come in. Is there anybody else that wishes to come in this item, just so I can get them on my list? Kenneth wants to come in and Councillor Reid. Okay, thanks. We'll take Councillor Alexander first, then Kenneth and Councillor Reid.
I'll be very quick. I'm delighted with the report, and I'm delighted with some of the concessions that have been made within the report to common sense as much as anything else. I can understand why Robert is saying he doesn't want anything to slip within the programme and wants to see the expenditure incurred. It's useful to have that flexibility, particularly in the first year, because it's new to people, it's new to the communities, it's new to ourselves. And what we don't want is daft initiatives coming forward. We've seen it in the press. End of the year finance coming to an end. Not so much for Falkirk Council, by the way, but we've seen it for other public sector organisations. The final contract signed in March each financial year for the paper clips, because it's a case of the mentality was at that time, use it or lose it. It's important that we continue to squeeze that out of the system, and so I think it's more important that we spend wisely than spend quickly. I think that it's excellent that we've got as a central priority the issue of child poverty, because I see Falkirk North as top of the league, and that's one league I don't want to be top of. So it's important that we have that end goal, which is to have an impact on child poverty, particularly to push the rates down. So again, I think we've got the central theme and the challenges to the community as well as to ourselves, is to develop these policies and implement. I want to get you with. Want to see they want to be top of the league next year or the year after in Falkirk North. So excellent. Only one concern I've got, Kenny, is that you're setting yourself up. Having 9 wards and therefore 9 separate groups, a hell of a lot to get around. It's a hell of a lot to manage, and it's a hell of a lot to give the encouragement to the communities that are necessary. So your workload looks as if it's going to increase significantly with this, and there's a major challenge for yourself on that. But good luck.
and yes, it is a challenge, but I know that Kenny has a couple of dedicated officers that are going to help take this forward, and that's also why there's the flexibility in the rollover around the funding, because we recognise that not everybody is going to be able to hit the ground running as a community group. But I think there's a role for us as elected members to be selling this communities and encouraging them as soon as things are up and running to get in touch and get that expression of interest in and allow things to develop. Kenneth, you wanted to come in?
Yes, thank you, convener. Just briefly, I mean, this is one of the most important reports we've brought forward in a long time, and it obviously builds on the focus on communities we talked about in the corporate plan at the council meeting and on our experience of COVID-19. I just wanted to say, this clearly implies a really significant change in culture and approach from where we have been historically, and we should not underestimate the scale of the challenge or indeed the volume of work involved in this, as Councillor Alexander pointed out. And I think Kenny's leadership and energy and enthusiasm is hugely welcomed. He's building a strong team around him to do this, but it's clearly a whole council approach, because it has to be how we operate as a council. We need to be adopting this approach across the full gamut of what we do. And if we succeed in delivering on all of this, and we will succeed, it will take some time and there'll be some bumps in the road, but we will succeed, then this will put us really at the forefront of how local authorities are working with their communities in Scotland. So I just wanted to make the point, it's not an easy thing to do, it's a big challenge, but it's really important. I think the member buy-in to this, and I suppose just from the point of view of myself as Chief Executive, really good to see the kind of level of engagement and involvement and the questions and issues being raised by members today. And my final point, just in relation to community choices, making this work will be a really fine balance between ensuring, as a number of members have said, that communities are adequately supported in doing this, but absolutely ensuring that the choices that emerge are the choices of the communities. So there needs to be enough infrastructure and framework to support the process. But it's that point you made, Leader, about us ensuring that we're letting go, so that what comes out at the end of the process is very much what communities want. And Councillors Kerr and Nimos and Bouse and others have emphasised some of the issues and challenges round about that. So it's a really important report. As a group of officers, we're absolutely with Kenny in trying to ensure that this happens. It's a whole council approach. It will be challenging, but I welcome members' input and comments and enthusiasm in relation to this.
Thank you, Kenneth. I'll bring in Councillor Reid, and I think that may well be the last speaker.
Yes, thank you, Convener. I'll be as quick as possible as well. I'd be remiss, first of all, not to welcome Jen. Certainly kick-started CVS with a vengeance, and understand the fee was somewhat less than that of Gareth Bale. Be careful not to get councilised, however, Jen. It can work both ways. Really, the Chief Executive said a lot of what I was going to say. This is probably maybe the first philosophical report ever to come before the current council, and it certainly represents a change of culture. I understand why child poverty was used as the main feature of deprivation. However, I think one group that could well be missed by the process is that of the elderly. There aren't so many age concern groups, for example, as there once was. And if you take Falkirk South, for example, which is coming out with quite a low sum, there's a high level of deprivation in the multi-storey flats, because the two elements of deprivation are health and car ownership. So I think we have to strike a balance in the future. Again, I acknowledge child poverty is the best one at the moment, but it may well be we have to refine that in the future. The third point was in a previous existence when we went out with what then was called, I think, participatory budgeting. There was quite a big turnout of people, but parent councils had a strong advantage because they represented quite literally thousands of people, and the voting process meant, used at that point, meant that they almost inevitably won the biggest prize. And so that's another thing I think we have to watch and to refine. Last point, just a wee point. If you add up the sums, it only comes to £990,999. Could Falkirk South get the extra pound, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. I think I'll go back and just reiterate something. The child poverty indicators are only used as a manner of distributing the money to the wards. The projects do not have to be focused around child poverty. It's up to the communities to come forward with the projects that they want to see. So it's not dictated that it should be only around child poverty. It's much broader around the well-being aspects there, and it has only been used as a method of distributing across the 9 council wards.
If I may just come in quickly, the point I was making that the elderly at the moment generally do not have a combined voice through any organisation. That was the simple point.
Can I just answer the point that you just made? Yes, I recognise the fact that it's not exclusively child poverty projects, but it's the term not exclusively, I would take as being a nod towards having it as a priority, child poverty, the eradication of child poverty. And certainly this is very high up in, I think, most people's expectations and also priorities.
Absolutely, and there will be some criteria developed around all of that, and I think that will be something that Jen and Kenny will be taking forward fairly quickly in order to be able to demonstrate some of the outcomes are in line with the priorities that come all the way back to the paper on our corporate plan that our communities had an input into there as well. So it needs to be actually tied back to all of that, and members will be made aware of that as we move to the next stage. But if there's nothing else, are we happy to agree the report?
Convener, I think Patricia was wanting in there, was she not?
Sorry, Patricia, did I didn't mean to. I didn't see you. Apologies.
Sorry, it was just a point for information. The Health and Social Care Partnership has significant partnership funds, which will also augment that funding available at locality level, and hopefully taking a joined up approach to do the participatory budgeting around the investment for health and wellbeing and prevention, and also taking account of all ages, but particularly in relation to older adults as well, so that there's an additional resource that's available for these communities to make decisions on. Thank you.
Right, thank you for that, Patricia. Okay, on that, are we happy to agree the report?
Great.
Okay. Thank you. Now, if people wish, I can have a 5-minute comfort break. Alternatively, we continue to push on. We do have 2 other items on the agenda, but I'll take a measure from members.
Push on, they should be quick.
Okay, happy to do that. Right, move on to item 6, which is the CCTV Digital Alarms Hub update, and it's Mrs. Algie that's going to take this.
Thank you, Convener. Convener, this report provides an update to members on the delivery of our CCTV Hub and Alarms Hub. You may recall that we reported last to members in December 2019, and that provided members with some options. And at that time, members agreed that we would upgrade our public CCTV equipment, replace the cameras, and move to more modern technologies from which that would be run, as well as creating our digital alarms hub and bringing that in-house in order to maximise the benefits that we could obtain by doing this work. So the report that you have before you updates you on the work that we've done since then. And this was all subject to us getting the capital funding, which was then agreed in February this year. And since February this year, work started, but had to be paused due to COVID. We have, however, picked this up since the summer periods and been able to dedicate an employee to that. And the work that we've been doing so far is summarised for members at paragraph 3.3 of the report. And you'll see that one of our tasks was to look at, in particular, how we brought that service in-house. And to do that, we've had quite a number of discussions with the company who currently run that service, Enigma, and through those discussions, we're of the view that 2P would apply to those employees who currently deliver the service through Enigma. So we're seeking your agreement in this report to end the contract with Enigma and to also work with Enigma to ensure that 2P is appropriately applied to those individuals who are running with this particular contract when we bring this service in-house. And that's one of the key recommendations, and will let us move on in this report. But to do that, we also need to relocate the service to our own premises, to council premises. And you'll see that we've got two options for this, which was to locate them as a standalone service or to link them up with our current ICT data centre. And having assessed those options and the various pros and cons of them, we are intending to move forward with a co-location with our ICT data centre into the Larbert premises that members agreed a week or so ago. And that will make sure that we share things like the generator and the costs associated with it, the network links that would then go into that building. And those things will bring us some efficiencies in terms of what we're doing. It may take us a little bit longer to do it, but that will not impact on the current delivery of CCTV services. Those will continue throughout this period of change and will be ongoing without any interruptions. As members may also be aware, we also, beyond the CCTV that is out in the public realm, we also have a number of CCTV systems and alarms in the various council offices and premises. And it's also our intention, if members agree to this, to bring those monitoring and management arrangements for all of those systems into the digital CCTV and alarms hub, and that should also hopefully bring us better monitoring, but also some efficiencies in terms of how we do that. We'll also then look to discuss options with our partner organisations to look at their CCTV systems and whether we can work together in bringing those in-house to support our partners in that respect and to get some benefits for all of us in terms of how we do that work. To make sure we have good progress in all of this, we have to have a sustainable model for our staff arrangements, and you'll also see in the report that we're looking to appoint a permanent team lead for this area of work who will manage and oversee both the project but also the staff involved in the delivery of this project, and who will also look at how we can further develop the work that we're actually doing to ensure that we do maximise the benefits that we get from the investment that the council is making in upgrading its CCTV and in delivering the alarms hub. The post itself we would be implementing from our current establishment and our current budget, so there's no additional cost to the council in doing that, and it's about workforce planning with the current workforce that we've actually got to redesign that in a way that provides that level of support. So I hope you'll agree this is quite an ambitious programme of work that we need to do to take it forward, and the recommendations convener are set out at section 2 of the report. I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And this is a follow-up report from the agreement to allocate the capital funding. and it's good to see it start to take some shape and going forward following the decisions made at council. But I'll go to Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Convener. And yes, I'm pleased to see this report coming forward. The establishment of an in-house CCTV and alarm monitoring, I believe it was positively received in December 2019, and as with many things, it's had to be delayed due to the ongoing pandemic. However, since July, officers have been working hard to bring it back on track, and as can be seen from the actions noted in the report, which Karen has already alluded to, so I won't repeat it. I welcome the recommendations in the report, as they are, to me, a common sense approach to move this forward, to get the organisation for 2P and the staff from Enigma to Falkirk Council organised now and in place before the actual move over just makes a sensible plan. Co-location, for me, it makes, again, if you repeat the words, but it is common sense to put it in with the ICT data centre. It's people with the same skill sets, as again Karen has already said about the generator savings and such like, but you're putting the right people together in the same groups. Integrating, where appropriate, all councils' CCTV and alarm services into one hub as per option 2. It may take longer, but it will save duplication of costs. And importantly, and as Karen and I had discussed previous to this meeting, our current CCTV will still remain monitored. So again, I think putting it in option 2 is very much the sensible approach to it. Developing partnerships, I think this is one of the keys, and I think this ties in with the employing the business lead on it. Is developing those partnerships and working with them to make sure we're giving the best. We need a good service for ourselves, but giving the best service that's going to encourage them to tie into it and become part of it. And you never know, you may even at one point be able to start looking at commercially developing it, which I'm sure was in the 2019 report, there is a potential to commercially develop it. So hopefully you'll be pleased to hear. I'll keep it quite short on this one, and I therefore propose the recommendations as laid out in item 2.1. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowes. Before I bring in other members, I'm going to just ask Patricia to maybe come in to talk about the partnership and the potential opportunities in developing the CCT and Digital Alarms Hub and supporting the work of the Health and Social Care Partnership.
Thank you. It's critical for our delivery plan that we extend our use of digital technologies and continue to develop not just the basic MEC service that we currently have, but also extend our use of other digital solutions for supporting people to stay at home, particularly older people with dementia. So it's a key part of our strategy, and the board agreed that we would develop a digital strategy. So it doesn't feature highly in this report, but it is a key area for our business. Also, we're keen to look at integrated out of hours services, and that's across social care and GP out of hours, and the development of other urgent care services that are currently on the table within NHS. So there are real opportunities if we can work together to look at that joint planning and joint investment as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Patricia, because I think it's important to just broaden this out, so it's not just about CCTV, it's not just about the public realm, it's something that's far greater than that. Is what we were looking to achieve, and that's what the investment's for. Okay, I've got Councillor Munro wanting to come in.
Thank you, Convener. I think in all our discussions previously, it's been very clear that there's been broad support for the upgrade of CCTV along the lines we saw in East Ayrshire, was it, last year? The question I have is that if we're relocating the service to Larbert, I believe that was deemed to be an interim solution in terms of council move, but given that the proposed new HQ only accommodates 120 people, is it perhaps intended that this be a permanent home for the service? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. I don't know, Karen, are you able to answer that? I know that there was discussions around that at the council meeting and the capacity to be able to deliver that within an HQ town centre setting, because of the technicalities and the accessibility. So are you able to clarify that?
Yeah. Yeah, you do have options there. So I think this comes down to what members decide that any town centre HQ will actually house. So there are options there. The lines and the technology is sitting in Larbert, and we have budget to do that. That's not a big issue. We have a data centre actually sitting in Larbert that we're able to use quite easily. It's about moving our current ICT data centre and then linking up the CCTV one. That can be done. But equally, if members were then subsequently to decide that they wanted the data centre in their town centre HQ, that can be accommodated in the future. So we are flexible on that because it's about the lines on the ground essentially, but those lines are there of sorts to enable us to accommodate the different options here.
Okay, Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, Convener. I think perhaps what Councillor Munro was alluding to, that it was meant to be a temporary move to Thomas Cook. So if we spend this money moving, centralising stuff, we might have to move it back again. But no, I think pulling these services together was the right thing to do, and we did agree that last year. Moving from analog to digital, pulling the services together, getting better uplinks. So one of the I do have an amendment, but one of the questions I would want to ask is around will we be? Is there any funding coming from partner bodies such as the police or the NHS? So that's a question that I just wanted to ask. But I just give notice of an amendment, and I can read it out just now if you wish. I think it centres around antisocial behaviour and the use of mobile CCTV and stuff like that. So I'd just like to add this recommendation. So the amendment reads, in addition to the existing recommendations, that the Executive 1 recognises that there are antisocial behaviour hotspots throughout the district and that mobile CCTV cameras can be a useful tool in detecting and preventing these behaviours. 2, notes their use in 15 are deployed and are considered a valuable asset in reducing antisocial behaviour, and the outcome of a recent pilot in Bowhouse Square in Grangemouth, where police and retailers agreed that had reduced the incidence of antisocial behaviour. 3, agrees to request a further report to the next meeting of the Executive, setting out the number of units that would be required and to what extent the funding agreed by Council already will allow for mobile units to be procured, and setting out any alternative sources of funding. I'd like to formally move that amendment.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bissett. I think we would need to give people a minute or two to see that, because it was quite a long amendment, and give it an opportunity to read it. And at that point, we can maybe have a further discussion and a view on it. I think it's now been shared on your screen.
Convener, do you wish this amendment to be seconded just now, or do you want to wait until later on?
If you wish to formally second it, I'm happy that be seconded.
I'm happy to formally second it and reserve the right to come back in, Convener.
Okay, thank you. Okay, have members had an opportunity to read the amendment? I'm aware that a number of members have seen the mobile units when we visited East Ayrshire, and they were used quite extensively, not just around antisocial behaviour, it was around areas of potential flooding, etc. And there are some benefits in that. I'm content that providing that the mover is happy with accepting the amendment. It's asking for information to come back and a further exploration around that as an addition to the proposals here. Obviously, we don't know the costs, therefore there's no budget allocation to that yet, but there's opportunities to look at that going forward, and indeed accessing any external funding.
I'm happy with that, convener.
Okay, thank you. I've got a number of hands now up. I've got Councillor Gardner and Councillor Alexander.
Thank you, convener. I was going to ask a question before the amendment came up, and it relates directly to the amendment, I think. And it's in 3.3. It states, visit to our councils to explore various models of delivery. And I'm aware of the East Ayrshire one. I'm assuming, considering Stirling was a relatively new deployment of this, I'm assuming we've already looked at Stirling to some extent, because this is certainly one of the newest around, and it's indeed one that we highlighted when we brought this to officers some time back, that it would be a good model to follow in Falkirk area. So could somebody tell me if that model has been looked at, which I'm assuming it has?
Karen?
Thanks, convener. Yes, we've looked at a number of models. We've also looked at Stirling and some newer ones on the west coast of Scotland as well. We have a plan for mobile units to be in the CCTV provisions, but we wouldn't be looking at them to next year. But we can certainly provide a report on where we've got to with that based on our work with other councils and our knowledge of that.
Thank you very much for that, Karen. I know it doesn't tie in so much to this, but we have mobile CCTVs getting used for fly tipping around the area as well now, which we've purchased and deployed.
Okay, Councillor Alexander.
Amendment.
So could you start again? We didn't quite catch that, David.
Yeah, I'm somewhat puzzled as to why we feel we need an amendment to something that's already there. The contained within the report is all the information that's been sought, with the exception of the Grangemouth initiative, which we obviously welcome and we take into consideration in terms of the several places down the line where we're developing at a later stage the detailed programme. I mean, this is going to take some time to actually put together. I mean, I actually moved the original motion in 1992 for the TV that we have, and that was tiny in comparison to what's proposed here. It took some considerable time in order to ensure we got best value. But we'll have to trust the officers to do that and then to bring them back to us. I don't see why we continually overburden them with producing reports which are not necessary at this stage, because everything is taken care of in this report and future reports. But there we are. I just have a quick question with regards to the issue of staffing. It's been some time since I got a tour of the premises that they have at the moment. And obviously they had a full 24/7 service at that point in time. So they would need fewer staff than what they had. But 4 seems to be an awful low figure. I ask if there's been any recent changes that, for example, if there's been any cuts and redundancies within the company, those 4 does seem to be, particularly the 4 are all part-time posts. Karen, do you-
Happy to come in on that. I'm not aware of any changes of late. We know that, for example, they did have a vacancy, but they recruited to that vacancy, so I'm not aware of the actual numbers having reduced.
That's fine. That's good. As I say, it's been some time since I got the tour of the place. But you know, that seems to remind me of a hub that was slightly busier than the 4 individuals. But we'll obviously wait and see what the final report says on that one. Thanks very much.
Right. Thanks, Councillor Alexander. I think there is going to be an update report following this anyway to members, and the information around the mobile units, etc., can be incorporated into that. So just to give you the assurance, it's not going to be additional work. It's work that's already ongoing anyway, and it'll just be incorporated into the update report. Okay, Councillor Nimmo.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Just in respect to the digital alarms hub, it's mentioned in the report that there's just under £1 million in capital spend being allocated for this, but there's no mention about what the revenue costs will be. I was just wondering if it would be possible to get a figure for that. Next point is in relation to the business lead that we're taking on. It says that this is to be paid from existing funds. What existing funds are these? The other thing is there's been some talk about our partners in relation to the provision of this hub and the use of the CCTV. Now, going back a number of years, Central Scotland Police and the Police Scotland used to be involved, and they used to financially contribute to the systems that we operated. When we start talking to partners, it's really quite interesting, because when you start talking about money, they start to fall off the edge of the cliff and become disinterested. How are we going to engage with partners and try and take this side of things forward so that we can actually get some money from them? If they're going to use the system, as far as I'm concerned, they should pay for it or contribute to it. If it's the case that we don't have any financial backing from our partners, can we charge for access to the information? I'm just wondering, because I haven't heard the answer to that one before. Thanks, convener.
Okay, thank you. There's a number of things in there. I think we're in regular dialogue with Police Scotland in relation to CCTV and in the discussions around that, but I'll allow Karen to come back and perhaps maybe answer the other points.
Yes, thank you. In the main, your revenue costs are your people costs and your building costs. So we're already paying for the people through the contract with Enigma. It's about how we bring them in-house, how we utilise the staff that we currently have in our contact centre and 24/7 service. So it's how we integrate that function with those staff to best benefit the council and our communities in that sense when we run the CCTV service. So that will bring us some benefits by joining those teams together. In terms of the extra post, we have been doing some redesign work on our current workforce establishments, and it's then about advertising that, but we would end up changing a post wherever that person came from so that it then helped to fund the new post. It would not be an additional cost to the council. We would be redesigning and retraining and redeploying someone into that job essentially to do that job and seeing a change somewhere else. Again, that's linked to our workforce plan for our business support team, and that is essentially about our workforce plan as to how we make sure that we get the right staff in the right places at the right time without that extra cost to the council. And on partners, yes, we are going to be working with our partners. There's various options in there that we need to look at, but we need to explore them further, and we also need to learn from the other councils who are maybe a little bit ahead of us on this about their work with partners, and make sure that we take some of that learning on board when we start to approach our partners on this.
Okay, is there any other questions or comments?
So have you just accepted an amendment, convener?
We expected the amendment as it's work that's ongoing anyway. It'll come back in an updated report.
Okay, and I just wonder if Karen could maybe answer the Thomas Cook move being a temporary move. You know, what the potential is for moving the data centre back somewhere else.
There is a potential there to move. I think that's the point that Karen actually made, that the infrastructure is already there within the Thomas Cook building that we can utilise at this time, and should they decide that it is to be relocated elsewhere in the fullness of time around the town centre. I don't know whether there was a discussion around the CCTV hub and the 24/7 hub around our resilience, and that being somewhere that is able to be easily accessed. I don't know whether Kenneth or Karen would want to say anything around that and the logistics of where your resilience hub might be in the event of major events, and which we've had too many of in recent times. Kenneth, Kenneth?
Yeah, just very briefly. I mean, I think that you know, the issue of interim or otherwise will depend where we end up with all kinds of issues, such as the ratios of staff that are working at desks in the longer term, issues round about the use of other facilities and the timescales associated with that, and also about partners, because we're looking to work with partners in the longer term in terms of office accommodation. In terms of the issues such as data centre and CCTV and resilience, there is an advantage in having a separation and an ability to run resilience capability away from the main HQ building in case the HQ building is impacted by whatever event has taken place. So I think we need to maintain a degree of flexibility on that, and that is certainly part of the consideration as we go forward.
Thanks for that, Kenneth. Okay, if we are all done, are we happy to agree the amended report?
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed.
Yeah, we're just going to bring Councillor Kerr back in from the lobby. I hope it wasn't too drafty out there for him. Councillor Kerr, you're back with us?
Thanks, Convener. Just catching up on Sky Sports Theory.
Okay, we move to the final item, which is on your supplementary agenda, which is the Civic Governance Scotland Act and the new private hire car driver licences. And I'll go to Mr. Moody.
Yes, thank you, Convener. I wanted to say something very briefly on why the item appears as a supplementary agenda as an urgent item. And first of all, to say why it didn't appear on the main agenda essentially relates to the very quick turnaround between the agreement of Council of the timetable of meetings on the 1st of October and the issue of the agenda shortly afterwards, and an error essentially on my part in not making it clear to my colleagues preparing this report that tight turnaround required to be met. In relation to the urgency of the item, that relates to the question of the shortage of taxi drivers and private hire drivers in particular that's addressed in the substance of the report. And that gives rise to a concern, particularly in relation to the provision of school transport. And I've taken some time to discuss that with Mr. Naylor to be satisfied that he was likewise satisfied that that was a problem that required to be addressed, and addressed sooner rather than later. So that was the question of urgency which arose, and that was the basis on which I made the request to the convener asked appropriately challenging questions about that, but kindly agreed to admit the item as an urgent report. In relation to the report itself, I don't intend to go into the substance of the report in detail because it's a recommendation which comes directly from the PDP. I'll defer to the portfolio holder as the convener of the PDP to take the executive through the proposal. The only comment that I would make in relation to the report itself is to draw the committee's attention to the equality section of the report, where we say there are no implications, and I think that maybe highlights the habit we are sometimes in saying that where there are no adverse equalities implications. I think it's appropriate to draw the attention of the executive to the fact that there are positive implications to the proposal here, because one of the groups most adversely affected by the shortage of school transport provision are those with additional support needs. But on that note, I'll hand over to Councillor Murtagh.
Just before I bring in Councillor Murtagh, can I ask that we limit because this is an emergency paper, can we limit it to this particular item? And because I know there's a lot of other work going on in the PDP at this moment in time, but we are being very focused on the particular issue in front of us, and that was the reason that this was accepted as coming forward as an emergency paper at this time. Okay, Councillor Murtagh.
Thanks, convener. And I suppose if we're going to continue the football analogy, I'll appear here as a trialist since I'm not a full member of the committee, but it's always nice to come back. So as Colin was saying, the paper before you is fairly simple and straightforward, and the recommendations are intended to be practical. They address the issues which I briefly outlined at last week's council meeting, or I suppose it's 2 weeks ago council meeting, in terms of issues which both are affecting the taxi trade, who, like many other sectors, are facing challenges during COVID-19, and also how that knocks on to our ability as a council to access home-to-school taxi transport. The recommendations are therefore designed as a practical and immediate measure to assist the trade, which we have a statutory duty as a local authority to maintain, and also make sure we're doing everything we can in terms of minimising any disruption to the education of our children, particularly those with additional support needs, as Colin outlined. Although I would say, just in a nod to Councillor Reid's earlier point, that one of the other groups who use taxis and private hire vehicles most frequently are the elderly, and that ability to have a viable trade will also impact on them. So, as is laid out in the report, the measures are designed to be temporary, and they're primarily to reduce the timescale and the practical barriers that new applicants to private hire may face, particularly in what is a difficult financial situation for people seeking new employment. I'm tempted to say ballet dancers notwithstanding. I'm happy to address and answer specific questions on these measures and how they will assist in terms of that practicality, but they are outlined in the paper, so I don't want to go over them for too much. They are based on evidence, which was somewhat challenging to gather because of the timescale in which we can tell these things for the taxi fleet. It takes a year, for example, from the decision a taxi driver might make to surrender their licence. So we considered that evidence at the PDP at the earliest possible opportunity, and have now brought forward these recommendations, and that evidence included representations from the trade on how it's affecting their numbers of drivers, and from our transport planning colleagues on how it affects the school contracts, and again, as Colin has said, with consultation with Education Department directly. So I would like to thank officers for assisting in that quick turnaround in timescale following our emergency meeting of the PDP, and to get it on the agenda today. But I think, as is outlined, it's important both for the challenges the trade are facing, and also that we do everything possible to minimise the disruption to our children's education through any lost hours. So it's certainly worth taking action on, and indeed my thanks to the convener for agreeing to take this as an emergency motion also. As it sits within public protection portfolio, it's important to stress that I am happy to recommend it from the point of view that there will be no reduction in statutory checks, and the knowledge test will still be required to be sat and passed within 12 months. The PDP will continue to sit and discuss our programme, as the convener said, including fleet composition and others, and we will look at further evidence in the regard of new technologies. But at this stage, consideration of these items would be premature, and we haven't had the opportunity to gather evidence on that. So as I mentioned in the last emergency executive, where we considered other temporary measures to do with taxi medicals, we continue to make adjustments in operational terms that also assist with this smooth running of, to support the trade. But these additional measures before you today will help, we feel, and the PDP in consideration of, the practical measures for the trade and for our own considerations. So I would ask you to support them today so that we can get them in place as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murtagh. As Councillor Murtagh is not part of this executive, on her behalf, I'll move the recommendations in the paper, and we'll open it to members. Councillor Bissett.
Thanks, convener. I have to say the Labour Group don't disagree with the recommendations. I feel that given the current situation, we're going to try and help local businesses, and certainly having local taxi companies and popped in to see how they were doing, as I have done with other businesses. You certainly see the cars lying around doing nothing, and you see the traffic coming in on their database, and they can't fulfil. Mrs. Smith's waiting to get her hair done on Thursday. Can't get picked up. Just no access to do it because a lot of people just didn't come back. Once after the lockdown, didn't come back. So there's a kind of a dearth of drivers. And they weren't fulfilling the school, not all of the school contracts. So as Councillor Murtagh says, we do have a duty to make sure our children get to school and are educated. And as the Councillor Reid mentioned before, the older generation certainly needs support, and this service is as vital as a bus service. So it's a temporary move, and it will allow people to very quickly become drivers, not skipping any statutory duties, of course. And it isn't a move to go back to the previous way we had. It's just a temporary move. And certainly the other thing that Councillor Murtagh was to is perhaps the GPS system that we have might be looked at in the future, where we don't have to memorise all the streets. But certainly we are, the Labour Group, happy to support the recommendation and happy to support local businesses in any way we can. And I think this shows that the council is listening and adapting where necessary to support the economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bissett. Councillor Harris.
Thanks, convener. Yes, there was some disquiet felt amongst the Conservative group with regard to, well, basically seeking reassurance that whilst understanding the urgency of the situation, and certainly having spoken to taxi drivers and minibus drivers, the number of these is really significantly down. We can see the urgency with respect to the school transport, but we're just seeking reassurance that we can understand that the knowledge base will take place, or the knowledge test will take place at some time in the future, but just seeking reassurance that no temporary licence would be granted without the normal police checks taking place. And on the back of that, just what is the sort of normal timescale for a police check for suitability or otherwise for granting a temporary licence?
Okay, I'll bring in Mr. Moody to answer that.
Yes, thank you, convener. I can reassure the committee that no temporary licence would be granted without consultation with the police in the usual way. So there will be a check on the police database to see if there are adverse convictions in the normal ways there would be with any other licence application. The police are able to turn this round fairly quickly at the moment, and I think it's a matter of a day or two, so that is able to be achieved. As an additional safeguard, if the drivers are going to be taking part in school contracts, then they will additionally require to go through the checks for the PVG scheme. So all of those reassurances are there to allow this to proceed.
Thanks, Colin, and thanks, Convener. With that, I think with that reassurance, then the Conservative Group would be happy to support the recommendation.
Okay, Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, Convener. I have to say I generally support the recommendations detailed in the paper. I think it's important to try and help businesses through this really difficult time. I do think, however, that this report was perhaps premature. It's not that long ago that we extended the no medical situation. I think it was for 6 months, and now we're doing the same with the knowledge test. It looks as if we're heading into a further lockdown as well. So we're going to go back to stage 1. There's going to be less people out and about in the streets, less people travelling to work. There's going to be less people out walking. And I just think it is premature, and I fail to see how this is going to help the businesses in question, the taxi companies. I'm not sure. It might work, but I'm just not sure. And like I said, I generally support the recommendations, but I do have concerns about the medical issue and the knowledge test and how this is going to affect the public and how it's going to protect the public in general. Thanks.
I think there's a couple of things there, Councillor Nimmo, that this is quite a discrete change for a particular reason. We don't have enough capacity in order to get the kids to school that we need to get to school, and I think that's where the waters have been kind of muddied a little bit. That's one of the reasons. So therefore, the routes are known. These are clear routes that are probably everyday routes that are known and not necessarily in need of having a full knowledge test in order to be able to do those regular routes, and it's a means to an end. I think we're going to face restrictions around movement for some time, but I also think as a result there is going to be more need for this type of facility rather than less need. And I'll bring very briefly and to answer the questions as Councillor Murtagh on that.
Yes, and indeed, Convener, I think that the likelihood of potential of further restrictions make it even more important that we act as quickly as possible, and particularly with respect to any disruption to our children's education. I very much hope that these measures will have a positive impact, but we must try everything possible to reduce that. I would say also, and I think probably the committee know that nothing that ever comes from my desk, as it were, goes without meticulous attention to detail and scrutiny. So the evidence that's been looked in this has been sought from the trade and has been asked robust questions of and cross-checked, and that's why it's been brought forward today. And it's with as much as Councillor Bissett was saying, we want to do everything that we can to help local business. I don't want to go into too much detail because there are obviously commercial sensitivities and that would not help them. So what I'm saying is that these measures are put in place to try to minimise everything possible, every barrier possible, but with the safeguards that are essentially in place. And I think it's something that we have to at least. It's what the trade and many within the trade are looking for, and I think we should be doing that to make sure that we're giving every opportunity for those who want to take part in the taxi trade and for their own reasons to make it a success. So that's why it's being introduced.
Okay, thank you.
Convener, can I maybe just pick up a point there? We're obviously making a number of assumptions here. If the COVID situation gets worse, we're on the danger of our schools having to close again. So that's going to negate the use of taxis to take kids to and from school again. So I still don't see how this is going to help the business side of things.
And you've probably just answered your own question there. You've made an assumption that the schools may close again. And I think we need to be very careful around the language around that. There has been a lot of work gone into making sure that we can continue to maintain our schools open as long as possible and there's least disruption for our children's education. And we need to be able to react and be able to be responsive to that, and where we can be proactive as well. And I think this is exactly what this is trying to do. While you have said there's assumptions being made, I think you've made assumptions, and something that I think that from the point of view of the public, we need to be very careful around, because if our schools have to close again, then the impacts are wide-ranging, particularly for people's incomes, for businesses, etc. And we know that the government is working very hard to try and prevent that from happening. I think this is a step forward, and it's something that we do need to do. It has been driven by the trade. People are finding it's difficult enough right now being able to maintain their income, and I think it's the right thing for us to be doing.
My assumption's based on past experience, convener. That was the only reason I highlighted that about the schools.
I'm not quite understanding your past experience in relation to that. This is not an experience that we've all had before.
Well, the schools were closed because of COVID.
They were closed because of COVID, and the restrictions that are put in just now are to look to continue to suppress the virus in order that we can continue to have our schools continuing to function.
And yet the number of tests increased day by day within our school setup.
Can I just say that
that's
can we move on here, please?
That's been managed, Councillor Nimmo, and that's your opinion, whereas the others have slightly different opinions and continue to support the guidance that's given. And what we don't want to do is to create any more anxieties than absolutely necessary.
Perhaps the Chief Executive could comment on that, convener.
I'm going to move on. Councillor Nimmo, to any other member that wishes to come in on this.
So you don't want to hear the Chief Executive's point of view?
I'll come back to Mr. Laurie in a minute, but I'm going to give the members an opportunity first, because obviously your group leader's got a different point of view to yourself in this. There's no other members. Kenneth, do you want to make comment? Because I mean, we're making comment as something that's not really part of this report, but it's also something that we are not in control of.
Thank you, convener. I mean, we are managing on a daily basis the issue in relation to outbreaks in schools. The numbers remain actually relatively low compared to many other council areas, and that is being managed effectively at this stage. And I suppose the other point I'd make is we're now, of course, within the 2-week break, and that might also have a significant impact on what the position is when the schools return in 2 weeks' time.
Okay. On that, are we happy to accept the report? There's no amendment coming forward.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for your attendance at Executive this morning, and hope to see you all again very soon. Bye just now.
Thanks to the chair.
Yeah.
Thanks to the chair.
Thank you.